Curtis Culp came into the world on March 11th, 1919, in a clapboard house that sat 20 miles west of Abilene, Texas, so far out on the high plains that the wind itself seemed to get lost looking for something to lean against. Nearest neighbor was 9 miles north, nearest store 32 miles east, and the only thing that moved faster than gossip was the dust when a norther blew in. If a piece of equipment broke, you didn't call a repairman. You called yourself, your father, and whatever scrap iron the prairie had coughed up that week. His father, Big Gene Culp, had broken horses for the cavalry in 18 and never quite broke the habit. He stood 6'4" in his socks and could still rope a steer, wrestle it to the ground, and brand it before most men finished cussing. He taught Curtis 3 commandments before the boy was big enough to see over the dashboard of a Model A, ride anything with 4 legs or a bad attitude. Shoot straight enough to hit a coyote at 200 yards and polite enough to apologize if you only wounded it. Weld anything that ever was metal, ever could be metal, or ever dreamed of being metal. By 12, Curtis could lay a bead so clean, the old man bragged you could read tomorrow's newspaper in the reflection. By 14, he rebuilt the ranch windmill, using nothing but a 1928 Chevrolet axle, some baling wire, and pure cussedness. By 16, he was cutting and shaping steel like other boys shaped words. Neighbors started bringing broken plows, cracked cultivator frames, even a John Deere tractor that had rolled into a gully and snapped its spine. Curtis fixed them all, never asked for money, only coffee and whatever story the owner wanted to tell while the rod burned. When Pearl Harbor happened, he was 22, lean as fence wire, and already tired of fixing things that only broke again. He walked into the recruiter's office in his Sunday boots and clean overalls and said, "I'd like the Seabees, sir. I can build anything, blow up anything, or make the pieces fit either way." The Navy was full up. The Army took him the same afternoon, typed engineer on his papers, and shipped him off to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where they taught him how to blow bridges with mathematical precision and rebuild them with government-approved parts. Curtis listened, nodded, and quietly packed the little Sears Roebuck arc welder his father had mailed him in 42, still in the original wooden crate, still smelling of West Texas dust. The quartermaster tried to confiscate it at the dock. Curtis told him it was a personal religious implement handed down from my grandfather. The quartermaster, a city boy from New Jersey, wrote that down in the log and waved him through. In the spring of 1944, the 1st Engineer Special Brigade loaded onto troop ships at Daventry, England, and the rumors finally turned into orders. France, somewhere, soon. Curtis stood on deck with his M1 carbine slung, his duffel at his feet, and that little welder wrapped in oilcloth like a Bible. He didn't know the beach had already been given a code name, Omaha, or that in a few weeks half the world would know it as the place where the invasion almost bled to death. All he knew was the same thing he had known since he was 6 years old. If something is trying to kill you and you can weld, you weld something back. The ramp dropped and the first man out took a German round through the neck before his boots touched water. Then the mines began to speak. LCVP-17 hit a welded rail with a 105mm shell on top, 10 yards from the sand. The explosion lifted the entire Higgins boat clear of the water, flipped it bow over stern, and flung 36 men into the surf like broken toys. Curtis was on LCVP-22, 2 boats back in the same wave. He watched the wreckage drift past and counted. 1 helmet still spinning, 1 rifle tumbling end over end, 1 life preserver still tied to a body that no longer needed saving. By 05:57, the tide had already painted itself red. The pre-invasion bombardment had missed most of the obstacles. The water was full of steel, Belgian gates, tetrahedrons, hedgehogs the Germans called them, each one crowned with a teller mine or an artillery shell wired to blow at the touch of a hull. Every 30 seconds, another boat died. The coxswains were trying to weave, but there was no room to weave. The channel was a shooting gallery, and the prizes were 30-man coffins. Curtis's boat grounded hard on a sandbar. The ramp jammed halfway. Men climbed over the sides into water that came to their chests, then their necks, then over their heads while MG-42s hosed the beach with a sound like the devil tearing sheet metal. Curtis went last, dragging the rubberized bag with the Sears welder. A bullet snapped past his ear close enough to part his hair. He didn't flinch. He had learned long ago that flinching doesn't stop steel. He made the shingle and dropped behind the burnt-out hulk of a duplex-drive Sherman, whose canvas skirt floated like a dead jellyfish. Lieutenant Haggerty, his platoon leader, was screaming into an EE-8 telephone that had gone dead 20 minutes earlier. "They welded mines to the goddamn rails! We're losing a boat every 30 seconds! Tell the Navy to—" He never finished. An 88mm airburst took the top off a nearby LCVP and flung pieces of men across the sand. Curtis looked past him. 50 yards down the beach, another boat hit an obstacle broadside. The hull peeled open like a sardine tin. Men burned in the water, too hurt to scream, too alive to die quick. He had seen livestock die slower than that. Something inside him, the same thing that made him rebuild a windmill in a dust storm when he was 14, clicked into place. He turned to the 7 men still alive in his squad and spoke the first calm sentence anyone had heard on Omaha Beach that morning. "Need a cutting torch and a welder, right now." The German obstacles were built from RSJ beams, 10-inch railway steel joists, the exact same iron big gene used for cattle pens back home. The Germans had driven them into the sand at 45-degree angles, welded mines or artillery shells on top, and called it defense in depth. Curtis's mind went straight to calf roping. When a half-ton steer charges a gate, you don't try to stop him dead. You give him something to slide along until he runs out of mean. He grabbed Sparks McAllister, oil rig welder from Tulsa, who could burn rod underwater if he had to, and pointed at a half-submerged Belgian gate 50 yards down the beach. "Cut me 2 8-footers. We're building a cow catcher for boats." They dragged a portable acetylene rig off a swamped DUKW, while bullets snapped overhead and 88s walked brackets across the sand. Curtis chalked an X on the wet steel, laid the beams across each other at 45 degrees, and started welding. Sparks fed rod. The torch hissed like an angry cottonmouth. Shrapnel pinged off the upside-down hull they were using for cover. 37 minutes of pure hell. A sniper put a round through Sparks's canteen. Water and whiskey mixed in the sand. An 81mm mortar round landed close enough to bury the torch hose. Curtis just kept welding, hood down, sparks bouncing off the wet sand like orange fireflies. When they finished, the thing looked like the horn of an evil rhinoceros. They manhandled it to LCVP 41. The ensign in charge, 19 years old from Nebraska, eyes the size of silver dollars, kept asking, "Is this authorized? Who signs for this?" Curtis didn't look up from the weld. "It's authorized now, son. Hold still." They welded the base plate straight to the bow frames while machine gun tracers stitched the air overhead. At 06:48, they pushed the boat off the bar. Every man on the beach who still had eyes stopped shooting to watch. The LCVP charged straight into a cluster of mined obstacles at 12 knots. The explosions went off the port and starboard, geysers 20 feet high. The boat never even shuddered. The ramp dropped clean. 32 men ran out dry shot and shooting. Curtis stood ankle-deep in blood and salt water and said the only quiet thing he would say all day, "Well, I'll be damned, it works." By 07:15, every cutting torch on Omaha, Fox Red and Easy Green, had abandoned every other job known to man. Word traveled faster than radio, faster than fear. Culp's got a horn that eats mines. Welders cut RSJs off the very obstacles that were killing them, dragged the beams through the surf, and welded like madmen. Coxswains formed lines like Saturday night at the filling station. Some boats got 1 horn, some got 2. One lunatic lieutenant from the 6th Naval Beach Battalion welded an entire Belgian gate sideways across an LCM and plowed a channel straight to the shingle like a steel snowplow. Captain Lorenzo Sabin, beachmaster for Fox Green, should have shut the whole circus down. Unauthorized modification of naval craft was a court-martial offense even in peacetime. Instead, he grabbed a welding hood, burned his own hands raw, and joined the chain. Years later, he told an interviewer, "I figured the Navy could hang me later, if any of us lived long enough to be hanged." By noon, 112 landing craft on Omaha Beach carried Curtis Culp's ugly steel X. Navy historians, working with ice-cold statistics months afterward, calculated those 112 boats delivered 3,346 additional men alive onto the shingle. That is the combat strength of an entire regiment. The regiment that finally took Vierville, opened the draws, and turned Omaha from slaughterhouse to foothold. The official after-action report devoted exactly one paragraph on page 47 to locally fabricated bow deflectors constructed from salvaged beach obstacles, and commended engineer initiative displayed under direct enemy fire. Curtis's name was spelled wrong. The Hedgehog became standard on every landing craft in the European theater by August. The Navy drew pretty blueprints, stamped them Bow Mine Deflector Mark 1 Somme, and pretended the idea had been born in some admiral's office instead of under machine gun fire on a beach that stank of cordite and diesel. Curtis never saw the blueprints. After D-Day, he moved inland with the first engineers, clearing mines, bridging streams, welding whatever the war broke next. On July 19th, outside St. Lo, he was cutting a path through a bocage hedgerow with a torch when a German sniper put one 7.92 round through the lens of his welding goggles. He died before he hit the ground. They sent the body home in a mattress cover. Big Gene buried him under a lone cedar on the ranch, the same tree Curtis used to climb when he was 8. The old man kept the last piece of RSJ his son had ever touched, still has the chalk X. Curtis drew the night before he shipped out. Faded now, but legible. In 1946, the Navy finally got around to awarding medals for D-Day. Curtis received a Bronze Star, posthumous. The citation praised extraordinary initiative in the fabrication of bow protection devices under direct enemy observation. It never mentioned he did it while the world burned around him, with a borrowed torch and scrap the enemy had left to kill us. Sometimes the difference between a beach that devours armies and a beach you can walk away from is one Texas ranch kid who grew up believing that if something is trying to kill your friends and you can weld, you damn well weld something back. Regulations be damned. Curtis Culp understood that. The 3,300 men who lived because of his ugly steel horn understood it. The admirals who later signed their names to clean blueprints never did.